The rand has had its fourth session of gains on today as recent positive economic data fueled hope that the global economy will soon recover. For a look at this and more, we joined now on the line via Skype, that is, by the CEO of Weaver Investments, Owen Khumalo. Owen, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on SA Today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's start with the data. Consumer inflation continuing on that downward trajectory in May. Your take on this?
I think it's reflective of the subdued economic activity that we've seen due to the coronavirus or COVID-19 lockdown. So inflation has been slowing, which is a good thing for the consumers. As you mentioned earlier, it's the last time we saw CPI at these levels was about 16 years ago. You have to go back to September 2004, and we have seen the reaction on the markets as well. If you look at the financial stocks, they've actually done very well today in anticipation of probably the Reserve Bank hiking interest rates to try and stimulate economic growth and avoid deflation by raising that inflation rate.
All right. So you agree with other economists that the Reserve Bank will leave the repo rate unchanged next week?
Probably leave it unchanged, but I think they also have to start thinking about with inflation at these lower levels, should they start another round of interest rate hikes as well, on top of what we've seen already.
All right, so let's talk about the markets. How are we looking today? Are we seeing perhaps recovery at sustained levels?
There has been some recovery on the JSE today. As we speak, the market is up 1.5%, so trading above 56,370 points. Whether that's going to be sustained remains to be seen, because as we've seen in the last few weeks, the JSE is quite volatile. And again, because we're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, any positive news on the development of a vaccine or a decrease in the number of mortalities will see the markets react positively. But any time we see some bad news like yesterday, if you look at how the markets reacted yesterday to the fact that the numbers in the US in terms of infection rates and deaths are still going up, the markets actually closed lower, and then we get some good news and the markets do tend to recover. So we're seeing some recovery. It's a volatile marketplace. Whether this recovery is going to be sustained remains to be seen. But if you look at the short term, you look at the last month or even the last quarter, the equity markets are reacting quite positively, and the JSE has followed suit in terms of its global counterparts as well.
All right, so the market's volatile, as you say, but in terms of the rand, is it recovering well? Is it at fair value, given that it started this year at 14 to the US dollar?
Yeah, we've seen some recovery in the rand. In fact, if you look at the last month, the rand is one of the top emerging market performing currencies against the US dollar. It's currently trading at 16.55 to the US dollar. So that's some good recovery. Whether that's fair value, I'm not sure, given that we actually touched above 19 rand to the dollar when we got downgraded by the rating agencies earlier this year, pre-lockdown. But there is some room to get to around 14 rand to the US dollar. And I'm optimistic because we seem to have shrugged off, or the rand seems to have shrugged off the sovereign downgrades that we got from the rating agencies. And the expected outflows from our bond markets have actually not materialized to the extent that people are projecting. So once we start to see foreign investors flocking back to our bond market, it will just strengthen the rand even further. So getting back to 14 rand to the US dollar is not far-fetched.
But the price of Brent crude oil, how is it looking, and what are we likely to see in the coming months?
We're likely to see the oil price strengthening even further or rising even further. So it's currently trading at $43 per barrel. That is the Brent crude price. And that's quite a rise from the levels where we were, if you just go back about 2-3 months ago, when we were trading below $30 US per barrel. As economic activity picks up, as the global economy starts to ramp up in terms of productivity and consumption, and locally as well, we're going to see the oil price rising steadily. So yeah, it's on an upward trajectory. I don't see the oil price coming down. The issues around OPEC and its other partners seems to have been sorted for now. There seems to be stability on the supply side. We're just waiting for the demand side to come to the party as the economy starts to recover.
But what does that say to us motorists? A possible fuel hike maybe in the coming months?
Possibly, yeah. We're already starting to see that coming through in the prices of petrol and diesel and paraffin at the pumps. So yeah, as the oil prices rises, we're going to see some increases, unfortunately, as consumers. But also that will start to feed into the inflation numbers as well. So I think that's why the Reserve Bank will be playing cautiously in terms of, do we hike rates now, or do we wait and see what happens to the inflation numbers? And with oil starting to rise, what will that do to the inflation numbers in the short term?
Not so good news there, Owen. But gold is one commodity that's been holding steady since the lockdown. How is it trading? Any interesting movements at this current moment?
So gold is held up very well, and as we know, when it's a situation of risk off on the markets, and investors are worried about the safety of their assets and the returns especially from the equity markets, they tend to go into gold as one of the safe havens or perceived safe havens. So that has driven the price of gold up, and if we're currently looking today at just over $1,808 per ounce. It's been rising quite steadily, and we haven't seen those levels of prices in quite a long time. But it's fear-driven. As the markets calm down, as we get a grip on the trajectory of this pandemic, and we start to see risk on returning onto the markets, the gold price will start to temper and return to more normal levels. But at the moment, it continues to rise.
All right, Owen, thank you so much for that in-depth analysis on the markets. That's Owen Khumalo. He is the CEO of Weaver Investments, talking to us about how the markets are currently looking.